Hey, my name is Cassidy Boggs, and this is my video. So my first question asked is why education? According to Live Science, 73% of students say they hate school, and I was one of those 73%. It wasn't until about 5th grade that I really started to like school, and it took one teacher to change that for me. I fell in love with math, and so it kind of just stems back to me wanting to be that same teacher for all my students. I want to be that change in students that help them understand fully so they can go on to love math too, because I can feel confident in learning in the future, because it takes foundation for those students to carry that on. And just like myself, if I wouldn't have had that foundation, I don't think I'd be here today. So it's exciting to know that I put that in my future students. So my next question, and it's why Ouachita Parish School System, and the only word that I have for that is community. I went to Swartz Lower and Swartz Upper, on to Ouachita Parish Junior High, and then I graduated from Ouachita High School, so I've been here my whole life. Ouachita Parish School System has changed me in a way that has made me love school. I want to give that to my students, and I really feel that this is home and this is where I'm supposed to be. I feel like this is where God has put me, and I'm just excited to see what the future holds. Third question is, what would observers see if they walked in on a typical day? On a typical day, I'd probably walk in and they would see my board, and I always have my objectives and I have what my students are supposed to do when they walk in. I like to have something that's just ready for them when they walk into class. That's always going to be on the board, and they will always start that right before the bell rings. After the bell rings and we go into class, I'll check the bell ringer, and it'll be a quick assessment. Usually they'll do it in their journals, and I call these learning logs. They're my favorite thing that I have learned from ULM. It's a journal that each child will have, whether it's on school supplies or I provide it, assessment for me for the whole entire year, and that is exciting because I'm able to see their thought process and the way they work their math, and I think this sets me apart, and that kind of goes into the next question too. I think this sets me apart because I'm so interested in their mind and their thought process. I want to know where they got step 1 to step 2. I don't care about the answer. I do, but I want to know where they went in their thought process to get that answer, and so I can then see where they're messing up, and then I go in and correct that, and they're looking for that answer, and that is not necessarily the end goal in math. It's getting to that answer and the thought process behind that. And so they would see with an observer will walk in. What they'll do is they'll have their journals out, and we'll begin our lesson. And a lesson usually begins with the objectives given to them, and it's an I can statement. And I love those because at the end of the lesson, the student can then say, I can do this. And if they can't, then I have a self-assessment for them to write on their exit ticket that they turn in to me at the end of the class. And if they feel like they can't do this, then at the end of the class, I know immediately that they cannot do this, and I need to intervene as quick as possible before the next lesson so they can then be ready and not feel behind. So I think that's what really sets me apart, is that I want to be proactive in a situation in the classroom. I don't want to wait until on Friday when they're on test day and they say, I don't know how to do this, and I've already intervened on Monday, and so they're ready for test on Friday. So I think this is really important in a math classroom especially, because finding those gaps in learning is going to be essential to their success. So like I said earlier, I've kind of been focusing on math because that's my calling. I feel like this is where God has put me, and that's where my strength lies, and I think that's what God gave me. So something else that might set me apart is that I am a children's church director at Swartz First Assembly of God, and it has been amazing. I've been there for a year now, almost a year and a half, and I just love it. It's just something that God has called me to do, and I'm just proud of it. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. I'm really excited to see what opportunities lie out there for me. I am open to opportunities in the Ouachita Parish School System. So thank you so much, guys.